Good morning, everybody. This is Dr. Brandy Maynard. I'm so thankful that you're here this morning. Today we're going to be talking about winning strategies for state testing preparation. My first question is, what brought you today? Please share with me in the chat area, why are you here? You woke up this morning, you probably got your cup of coffee or tea or something warm to drink, maybe you made breakfast. What caused you to sit down at your computer for an hour to learn about strategies for state testing? I know that there's a lot of pressure out there with the new Common Core standards for students. There's pressure for parents, there's pressure for teachers, just to figure all of this out. And I'm guessing that's why a lot of you came this morning. It looks like, just to be prepared. So you felt like you understood what was going on with the state test, to understand the Common Core standards a little bit better. Maybe that's why you're here. Maybe to get a few more strategies that you can use with your students, not only on the state test, but in other areas as well throughout the curriculum. Some of you know that the test that students are going to be taking is different than anything they've ever experienced before. So you want to make sure that your student does well on the test and understands these strategies that they need in order to be successful when they go into the testing situation as well as in life. The strategies that I'm going to share with you today are critical and creative strategies that will help your children with research and writing. Give me a green check if your student could use a little bit of work with their research and their writing. I know that there's a lot of parents out there. I hear that all the time. Can you please give me some strategies to help my student with research and writing? Those are two things that are huge when it comes to students. Just really knowing how to communicate effectively. That's so, so important. Well, my name is Brandy Maynard, and I'm here with you today for the next hour just to share some strategies that I've learned along the way. I learned these strategies from a seminar that I went to years and years ago, and I've just kind of melded them and molded them and made them into something that I think would be very beneficial for you when you're getting your students ready for testing. I use them in my own research in my graduate program, and I'm really excited to share them with you because I believe that the strategies that I'm sharing will be able to help your students with writing from elementary school all the way through college and beyond. I've been teaching gifted kids since 1997, and I've been working in a virtual school in the Idaho Virtual Academy since 2002, working directly with gifted and talented kids. I taught gifted and talented kids in a brick and mortar classroom for about 5 years, and then moved into the virtual world. My background is in gifted and talented education. That's the classrooms I've been in my entire career have been with gifted kids, and I earned my master's degree in gifted and talented from Whitworth University and my PhD in leadership from Gonzaga University. So I'm thrilled to be here with you today, and I'm thrilled to introduce you also to Ms. Carly Thompson, and she is in our chat area right now. So feel free to have a conversation with her. She's there. She's gifted and talented. She's our gifted and talented teacher here, and she's certified in gifted and talented education, an invaluable teaching partner for me, and she's wonderful when it comes to answering questions in the chat. So if something comes up that you have a question about, she's very knowledgeable about the state testing, and she will be able to help you along the way too. And also, if there's a question that you have for me, she will send that question to me, and I will be able to address it as we go along. So please send any questions that you have to her in the chat area, and she'll keep things going. So again, not only is this going to help your child be successful on the performance-based portion of the test, it's also going to be something you can use across the curriculum. So I'm very excited to share some strategies with you today. All right, let's start by looking at our map here. Go ahead and use your pointer tool and show me where on the map you're located. I'm coming in from just north of Spokane, just on the close to the North Idaho border there. And Carly's coming in from southeast Idaho down below. And we've got people coming in from all over the nation, which is very exciting. And you can see here, these are the different states that are participating in the Smarter Balance test. We call it the SBAC test. It's a Smarter Balance test that the students are taking. It's based on Common Core student standards. And we can see here that some of you are coming in from Texas, and you don't have any affiliation, but these strategies will be good for you in the curriculum as well, and once your state decides what they want to do. But many of us are coming in from part of the Smarter Balanced Assessment Consortium. It's a group of states that are saying, you know what, we want to have common standards across the nation for our children to meet. And we do that in a couple ways. So I'm going to share with you a couple ways that we do that. One is a computer adaptive test, and that's one of the tests that your students will be taking. Some of you are taking something similar to a computer assessment test right now. Go ahead and give me a green check if your state does some type of computer assessment test. Generally it's multiple choice, looks very similar to what's on the Scantron test. I know that most states are doing that type of a test right now. If you're doing something different in your state, more of a written test, go ahead and give me a red X. There are some of you that are doing more of a written test. So at this point, most states are doing a computer-based adaptive test, and they're switching over to a two-part test. One is an adaptive test, a computer adaptive test, so it will go up as your student answers correctly, and it'll go down as they answer incorrectly as far as the level of difficulty. And the second test that's going to be added this year is a performance-based test in both language arts and in math. And we're going to be talking about the language arts test today. And this is a written test. I say written, but it's typed. Carly, I'm going to have her type into the chat area, a really good tool for you to use if you're interested in doing typing with your students, and it's called typingweb.com. So if you want to do some typing skills with your students, that would be an excellent way to do that. Also, rapidtyping.com is another free typing program that will help your students learn how to type better, because that's one of the things that they will need in order to be successful. We don't want to hold them back. And that's the way that we're going in life as well, is we're really moving towards typing, and probably eventually voice recognition will be on every machine, but we do want them to have that ability to type in a way that doesn't interfere with their thinking. So that's a good way to do that. So when we start talking about this performance-based testing, I like to think of it in terms of preparation. And I think about it, I don't know if any of you used to have to run a mile in school. Give me a smiley face or a groany face, some type of emotion if you were scored in PE class for running a mile. I know that we were scored in PE class and we had to run a mile, and it was not my favorite thing to do. But it was something that we had to do. It was something that was tested, and we were all expected to do it. The goal was to run a mile. Some of us ran on a track. Others maybe ran in a gym or in a field. If you remember where you ran, feel free to type that into the chat area. I know we had a nice track that was outside of our school, but depending on where you grew up, I'm sure that you had many different places that you ran your mile. But the task was the same. We all needed to run the mile. The results were trying to determine how fit we were initially. Could we run a mile, and could we do it in a reasonable amount of time? But really the long-term goal was to run a faster mile than we ran last year, or last month, or last week. We tried to improve on our best time. And the performance-based test reminds me of this experience that all of us shared. The performance-based portion of the SBAC test gives students a specific goal. So in this case, with the language arts performance test, it's to effectively communicate our ideas using research as a basis for our thinking. So our students are going to effectively communicate their ideas using some articles and things that they gather along the way. Next, they're going to be given a task to show what they know. So these tasks or exercises elicit the performance we want to evaluate. So in the case of running, the task was to run a mile. In this case, it is to have some type of product that they create that shows that they can communicate their ideas effectively. In the SBAC, it's about researching, writing, and critical and creative thinking. And then finally, the students have a standard to reach. So in running, it was time. And in writing, students are scored using a rubric and a minimum standard. And there was a really great research piece that came out about performance-based assessment, and I wanted to share this with you. This was from Adamson and Darling Hammond, and it says, research shows that well-designed performance assessments yield a more complete picture of students' abilities and weaknesses and can overcome some of the validity challenges of assessing English language learners and students with disabilities. And I thought this was specifically geared toward gifted kids as well, because when we look at a test that has the answers of A, B, C, and D, We don't know if our kids are creative thinkers, if they're critical thinkers, where they are in the writing process. It's just, oftentimes gifted kids are really, really good guessers. And so in this case, with the performance-based assessment, it's going to give us a more complete picture of the student's abilities, their strengths, and their weaknesses. And then, like in Running the Mile, next week, next month, next year, we're going to look for improvement and better scores that they had the year before. We want to show growth in all of our students. And with gifted kids, the growth is going to be less than it would with an average student because a lot of times they come in already up at that ceiling, and it's difficult for them to push, they're already at a 10th grade level to push into an 11th grade and a 12th grade. But we do want to see growth every time that the students are tested, whether it be informal or formal testing, or in our case in the virtual academies, we collect 2 work samples in a year. We collect one in the fall and one in the spring. We want to see growth between those 2 work samples. We want to see their writing improve from the fall to the spring. That's our goal as teachers and as parents and as educators. So one way that we're going to do that is we're going to have a performance-based assessment nationwide that's going to show how our students improve. And so this is an example of one of the items that they're using as a sample for 3rd grade. So this is a 3rd grade stimulus or research piece that they're going to use to get our students interested and excited to talk about astronauts. So we can't prepare them until we know what we're preparing them for. So the first portion of the performance-based test is known as a stimulus. And so students are given the stimulus and they are asked to read through it with a partner, and then in pairs they're going to discuss what this stimulus is all about. So basically what they want to do is they want to familiarize all of the students with what it means to be an astronaut. They don't want students who have been, studying astronauts for years to have a complete advantage. They will have an advantage, but a complete advantage over somebody who doesn't even know what the word astronaut means. And so it's trying to get all of the students at least to a level enough ground that they come in with enough prior knowledge to know what it is that they're talking about. So in this case, the students get together. They'll have 15 minutes to answer the following questions. These aren't written. These are discussion questions. I don't know how the different schools are going to do with this. It's going to be different across the nation. And so they may have partners in their classroom that they're working with, and the teacher will just pair them up once they get to testing. They may have a computer-assisted way of doing this. It's all kind of up in the air at this point. These are field tests that are coming out this year. They're norming the SBAC test and trying to figure out which questions are good, which questions that they can throw out, and trying to figure out what works. So in each of the virtual academies, they're trying to figure out what works as well. And so this is just giving the students a really low-level introduction to astronauts in this case, and giving them an opportunity to talk about astronauts and think about astronauts with people that are around them inside of the classroom. So that's the first portion, and this is known as a stimulus. And so using your pointer tools right now, just choose. There are all these different types of ways that we can stimulate students. Which one did we just look at? Go ahead and use your pointer tool. Under stimulus, which one did we look at? It's not a trick question. It's a pretty easy answer for those of you who have your pen tools. Go ahead and select that one. Yes, so we looked at readings, didn't we? We were able to read some of the things that were on there. We also looked at visuals. There were some visuals on that page, and students will have visuals as well when they are taking a look at these things. They'll have pictures generally that they can look at, maybe some charts and other visuals. And we also looked at a research topic, an issue or a problem, which was, what is an astronaut? So this gave us some background knowledge. Sometimes they'll be given some audio or video clips, and that is all dependent on what the SBAC test has for for the students this year. We're just not sure what that's going to look like yet. And it's nice because it's really a low level of concern at this point. Showing up is a high priority, showing up for the test, but the low level of concern is that the test is being normed this year. It's a field test, and you'll have the opportunity, your children will have an opportunity to see what's expected of them, so they'll be ready for it when they go in next year. That's how I'm looking at it. I know that with my own little kiddos, I want to make sure that they have exposure to that, so then we can work on it over the next year. They know what the experience was like. You know what the experience is like from today's experience that we're having here today, and then we can help them to grow and learn as we go along. All right, let's take a look here. So this is the task. Go ahead and read through this task if you will. This would be the task that a student would be given. Once you read through this test using your typing tool, so it's the A with the lines here on the left-hand side, go ahead and type in the bottom, what is it that your students need to be able to do? So read through this and tell me, what do they need to be able to do when they're done with this assignment? What do they need to know? What should they do first? Use your pointer tool to click on something that you think is really important, and then go ahead and write some of the most important things underneath the orange line. What do your students need to be able to do or perform using this question? Let's go ahead and take a minute to do that now. Take about 20 more seconds to do that. You're also going to need a pen or pencil, and 2 sheets of blank paper. So go ahead and take about 20 to 30 seconds to finish up these things. And if you need to open up your printer and grab out some paper and a pencil, go ahead and do that right now also. There's a lot of great conversation that's going on. You guys have some excellent ideas of what students need to do. And there's some good points in the chat area. Some of this vocabulary students may not know, like scanning the sources. And so when you're talking about these things with your student and you're looking through these different tasks, we're going to give you a website that has all sorts of different examples. Go through and read these carefully with your students and do exactly what we're doing right now. What exactly do you need to know? Give them a highlighter pen and have them highlight the things that they need to be able to do by the time this is over. So they may highlight some of the things that you've highlighted down here to scan, review, and write, to be able to take notes and know what kind of notes to take. So these are all skills that they're exposed to in the curriculum, but they also need to be able to show what they know here. To be able to read articles, real articles, from different sources. So they'll have 2 different sources in this case that we'll be looking at. To organize and present their information and answers clearly and logically. To summarize, to spell things correctly, to answer questions and then write an article. These are all fantastic ideas. These are all things that students need to be able to do. And you want to be able to show them how to do these things and to help them to identify what it is that they need to be able to do. That's very, very important. Because if they don't know what they need to do, then there's really no way for them to get there. All right, so I asked you to get out a piece of paper and a pen, 2 pieces of paper actually. We're going to start with this one. Go ahead and just fold this paper in half and then fold it in half again. So you've got 4 squares. So everybody should take their paper and fold it in half and then a half again. So you've got 4 equal squares, and then go ahead and open it up. I'm going to teach you another way to do this, but when the students are at the testing site, that's what they have. They'll have a piece of paper or a few pieces of paper and a pen or pencil. So we need to have them give them a strategy that they can use with the materials that they have. Okay, so we've got these 4 quadrants or 4 areas on our piece of paper that we're going to be taking some notes on. So let's go ahead. We know that the topic is astronauts. So across the top, go ahead and write astronauts. And then we're going to take a look at question 1. And I often get asked this, are the students going to be able to go back and reread the articles? Yes. They're going to be able to scroll back and forth so they can look at the questions and look at the articles. So let's go ahead and take a look at this question here. Go ahead and read it to yourself. And then in the space provided, using 1 or 2 words, what are your students going to need to be able to do? You can type it in the chat area, or you can write it on this page directly. But what are they going to need to find out? What do they need to know in order to answer this question? Take about 15 seconds to figure that out. Excellent. You guys are doing a great job. If you want to use your pointer tool, if you've already written out your answer, go ahead and put your cursor on something that you think is really, really important on this page. What do you think is really, really important on this page? Go ahead and put your cursor on it. When you're ready, we'll take a look. So students need to find supporting details. They need to be able to cite their sources. They need to know what a source is. That's going to be an important piece of information that's going to be vital for them to understand what that means. And what does the word cite mean? They need to figure that out too. They need to be able to read carefully and understand the problem, what's being asked. They need to use information again from both sources, giving 3 reasons. So we've got sources here, we've got 3 reasons. I thought it was important to know that they were not going to be scored on their grammar, usage, conventions, spelling, or punctuation. They will be on the final portion, but not on this first portion. So I thought that was kind of important too. So here we go. We've got all of these things that students need to know. So how are we going to help them to organize all of this? Well, the first thing that we need to do is write, why is it hard? That's the question that they're asking here. Why is, it says give 3 reasons using information from both sources explaining why it's hard to be an astronaut. So I'm just going to write out the question, why is it hard? If you want to write why is it hard to be an astronaut, feel free to. You can put a 3 next to that if you'd like to, or you can put 1, 2, 3. Personally, what I would do is, I think it's a little confusing to do the 1, 2, 3. So personally, if it were me, I would just put a 3 next to this up here. So I knew that I need 3 supporting details of why it's hard to be an astronaut. So that's going to be my first area of information that I need. How are we doing so far? Give me a green check if things are going well and you feel like you're understanding this so far. A red check if you're a little confused. All right, excellent. So why is it hard? We need to figure out why it's hard to be an astronaut. So the second question is what? Go ahead and read through this. Again, what are the big ideas here? What are students going to be able to need to know? And finally, when you're finished, put your cursor on what you think is the most important piece of question number 2. Again, as your students are working on this, give them a highlighter. Allow them to do some of the same things that you're doing to try and figure out what it is that's very important for them to know. In this case, they need to be able to tell you, does source 1 explain floating in space better, or does source 2 explain floating in space better? So we know that we're going to be looking at 2 different sources, and many of you put here that we need 2 examples from that source. So we need to be taking some notes here to give us some information on which of these sources are explaining floating in space better. So we've got some critical thinking that needs to take place here. You guys are doing an excellent job of coming up with these ideas, and these are all excellent strategies that you can take over to your students and show them how to do this. It's not hard. They just need to practice. So here we go. We've got our piece of paper. Second quadrant, floating in space. Again, I wouldn't do the 1, 2, 3. I would just say I need 2 examples from each for my paper. So I'm just going to write a little 2. So go ahead on your paper and type in or write in these 2 things that you're putting in there. And I'm going to have Carly go ahead and put a 2 next to floating in space. So we've got why is it hard? We're going to come up with 3 pieces of information on why it's hard as we're reading along. Floating in space, we're going to come up with 2. We can definitely come up with more. Students are going to be graded on 2 examples, but what's the harm in giving 3? And really talking to them about that, how important it is to maybe go the extra mile when it comes to some of these things. Not to the point where they're paralyzed and they have to deal with perfectionism, but if there are 3 different examples that they can show, throw them on there. The more the merrier. All right, so now we've got 2 of our quadrants filled up, and we know that we need to figure out why it's hard and which one of these articles is best when it comes to describing floating in space. And the question was, at this point, are they still working with a partner? No, they are not. That's a great question. At this point, just the stimulus is when they were working with a partner. The second piece that we're talking about right now, they're working on independently. So they're no longer working with a partner. So we need to figure out what the final project is. So again, using your pointer tools and underlining, go ahead and look through this. What are students going to need to know, or what are they going to need to be able to do when they're finished with this project that they're creating? What are they creating? What do they need to know how to do? Take a few minutes to read through this. Go ahead and underline things that you think are important. If you want to take some notes on here, feel free to do that. What would you share with your student when looking at this? What is it they're going to be able to need to know how to do? All right, so many of you are reading through this and you figured out that students need to, basically, they're going to write an informational article, a magazine article. And they're going to plan the article, take notes. That's what we're doing here on our piece of paper. Then they're going to plan a draft, revise, and edit your article. These are all things that they're working on in the curriculum. It is part of the writing process. They're graded on the 3rd grade level. So it's not like they're graded, against other kids who are much older than they are. So please help that to lower your level of concern. And also know that the testing will be graded this year, but we will not be getting the scores. The schools will not be getting the scores, the teachers will not have access to the scores, and the parents won't have access to the scores, just the state. They want to norm the test and figure out which questions are good, which ones that they can throw out, and then create a standard based on the average third grade student or the average fifth grade student normed to the students in the nation. So here's the informational article, and it's sharing that everyone's going to write a magazine article about interesting jobs that people do, but in the article that your student is writing, it needs to be several paragraphs long, and it needs to describe the job of an astronaut. What is that job like? And the student's audience is the class, the parents, and the teacher. And then it shares that you need to have a main idea, and you need to develop your ideas clearly, and then it gives them very specific ideas under here on the informational article, what it is that they need to have. So we've got those ideas. Here. All right, so let's take a look at this. Let's go back to our piece of paper here. Why is it hard? That's the first thing that we need to answer. The second thing is floating in space. Which article does a better job of explaining floating in space? And then we're just going to take some information out of our research of what do astronauts do. What do astronauts do? We've got quite a bit of space to do that. If you need more paper, feel free to do that. So I'm going to model what this is going to look like. And then I'm going to read these articles to you, and we're just going to take some notes and see how we do. So let's go ahead and just read this article. And I'm going to read it out loud to you. And then what you're going to do is take some notes as we go along. So let me explain how this works. Let me read the first paragraph here. Have you ever thought about what it's like in space? So this is article number 1. It is by Corbis, and it's called, actually it's by Talia Lee, and it's called What is an Astronaut? Have you ever thought about what it's like in space? Astronauts are people who go out in space. So I'm reading this to you. I know you can't see the article now because I want you to be able to see what's on the screen. But the second one was astronauts are people who go into space. So I'm going to just take a few notes here because I want to know what astronauts do. They go into space. And then after that, I'm going to write a 1. Because, and this is why is it hard? It is actually goes underneath what do astronauts do. They go into space. And then I'm going to put a 1 after it because this is coming from source number 1. So I'm just taking some notes. Number 2, or sentence 2, being an astronaut is an exciting job. Astronauts can see Earth from space. Okay, this is all information, but it really doesn't pertain to what I need here on my notes. Let me keep reading. They can see it's round like a ball. They can look down and see clouds, land, and water. They can even see the moon up close. Astronauts get the chance to see more stars than you and I have ever seen. So in reading that, it sounds like astronauts float in space. So I'm going to go ahead and type in float in space, and I'm going to write a number after it. What am I going to write after it? Go ahead and tell me in the chat area. What am I going to write after it? A certain number. Any ideas what I'm going to write? I'm going to write a 1 after it because this is still source number 1. So we want our students to be able to differentiate between source number 1 and source number 2. So it's the source number. And then also it says here that they get to see all of these things. So I'm going to put they see things. And I know what that means. I could put see things in space if I want to, but really I want to find I want to use as few words as I can when I'm taking notes. So I would probably just write see things, but see things in space is okay. That's what they do. So as we go through here, we're on source 1. I'm going to continue to read this article. Carly is going to be taking notes on what astronauts do, why it's hard to be an astronaut, and floating in space. So Carly's going to take over on the note-taking over here on our screen. You're going to listen to me, and you're going to take notes as well. So I'm just going to read this out loud. I realize that you don't see the article, but I do want you to see the notes that Carly's taking. Your notes are probably going to look different, and that's okay. Remember, you want to use as few words as possible. You don't want to get bogged down in the notes, and we train students to use as few words as possible because we do not want them plagiarizing. So if they can use as few words as possible, it's less likely that they're going to write run-on sentences that have all the information that that the students need. So let me go ahead and continue reading this. And as I'm reading this, go ahead and just take notes. Take as many notes as you want and as many ideas as you want to on here. If you have extra things, like maybe you have, you want to have a section on the back that says etc. or extra notes, or just something that you think is interesting fact, you can write those on the back as well. Okay, so here we go. I'm still on source number 1. Being an astronaut may be exciting, but it's not an easy job. A person who wants to be an astronaut has to study for years. There are many things an astronaut must learn to do before going into space the first time. Okay, so you may have taken some notes as we go along here. Maybe you didn't find anything that you needed in that section. Let's continue reading. Astronauts train for hundreds of hours. There are 3 different levels of training they must pass before leaving for space. I'll give you just a second to catch up. Astronauts, oh, we talked about that one. They also learn medical skills so they can keep each other healthy and safe when they are in space. Astronauts learn what life is like on the International Space Station, parentheses, ISS, and they also practice riding in special vehicles that are meant just for space. They even take classes in scuba diving. The feeling in their suits underwater is very similar to walking in space. A very important thing astronauts must also learn is how to work together as a team. Each person has a special job to do as part of the team. Okay, so many of you have notes that are written down now, and all of them should have a 1 after them because this is information from the first source. Now we're going to go ahead and move to the second source. And the second source is called Astronaut Underwater. And what I would do here, actually, that I didn't fail to mention in the beginning, is I would go to the top of my paper and I would write a 1 and I would write, what is an astronaut? So I knew which article it came from. And then I would write number 2, and the article for number 2 is Astronaut Underwater. Oh, actually, nope, I take it back. I haven't gotten to number 2 yet. I am really sorry. I was looking at something completely different. So we are still working on source number 1. I was thinking there wasn't enough information. This astronaut underwater is actually a picture that was taken of an astronaut underwater. Okay, so let's keep going. Since there are different kinds of astronauts, who have different kinds of jobs, some of the training they get is also different. Some astronauts learn about how to put things together and become very good at fixing things. They go to space to fix things on spaceships. Some astronauts are pilots who know how to fly airplanes. As I'm reading through this, you're probably seeing why it's important just to write down a few words, because otherwise you might get a little bit behind as we're reading through this. You just want to be quick, something that'll spur your thinking when you start to write your article. They have to study how to fly and steer a spaceship. They train for many hours to learn how to turn it, how to make it go faster and slower, and how to guide it through space. Some astronauts are leaders. They are in charge of all the people on the ship. They make sure everybody is doing the right job. Other astronauts learn mostly about science. They go into space to learn how living things change when they're in space. When astronauts are in a spaceship that's moving around Earth, they feel like they don't weigh anything at all. They can float. Now this might be something that you put on your etc. page, or something that you flip over on the back with interesting notes. I'm sure your students would find that very interesting, your children. This is because the spaceship is in a constant free fall from Earth, which means it's quickly dropping as it moves around Earth. When something is in free fall, it can feel as though it's weightless and floating. Many astronauts say it's fun to float around the inside of a spaceship. Other objects in the spaceship can also float. So astronauts can lift and move heavy things easily. Feeling weightless is fun, but being in space is hard work for astronauts. Astronauts must be healthy and eat right. They have to exercise and be in good shape. Astronauts get to have many adventures, but they work hard too. And that's the end of Source 1. How many of you got really good notes from Source 1? Go ahead and give me a green check if you took some good notes from Source 1. Some information that will help you. All right, excellent. I'm going to move through Source 2 a little bit quicker. Carly's doing an excellent job taking notes here on the screen. Notice all of the notes are very short, succinct, and they have a number 1 after them. The next source, number 2, is the title of it. I don't even have the title of it here. Oh, it's called Life in Space. So go ahead on the top of your paper and write a number 2 and write Life in Space. And the author for this one is Higgins. Life in Space. So let's go ahead and take some more notes. I'm going to read through this one a lot more quickly, and go ahead and put a number 2 next to all the notes that you take for the second one. And again, this is just an exercise. We're going to get through this quickly, and then I'm going to share with you how all this goes together. Here we go. Life in Space by Aaron Higgins. Many people say they want to be an astronaut, but do they really know what it's like? Because astronauts have to know many things. They spend many years studying. Now I think, do we have a note here about the amount of time that they spend studying? Let's see. It looks like we do. They train for hundreds of hours. So you don't have to rewrite that. You can just write a 2 next to it. So they train for hundreds of hours. The second source is also telling us that they spend many years training. So after that number 1, go ahead and write a number 2. And that makes your note-taking a lot easier. And you'll notice as we go through, there are going to be several 1s and 2s. They go to school for 12 years. So I would definitely put 12 years on here and put source number 2. And that might be under why it's hard. Because going to school for 12 years, I have to say, is not an easy thing to do. Then they go to college for 4 years. So they go to school for 12 years, obviously elementary through high school. Then they go to college for 4 years. After that, they have to study at least 2 more years. That's 18 years total in school. Some astronauts spend even more time studying. After all that time in school, they still have to do special training to learn how to live in space. When astronauts are in space, they feel weightless. So if we have a note about feeling weightless, we can also put a number 2 by that because it was mentioned in both articles. They can float. This sounds like a lot of fun, but it's not that simple. The human body is used to being on Earth. Some people stay out in space for months. A lot of strange things happen to the body when it feels weightless and floats for that long. Astronauts sometimes feel sick in space. It takes a few days for them to get used to feeling weightless and being able to float. Being in space also changes how blood flows in the body. In space, more blood flows to the astronaut's head. Their face gets puffy, their necks get bigger. At the same time, less blood flows to their legs, making them skinny. They call this condition bird legs. The heart is a muscle. It pumps blood around the body. The heart does not have to work as hard to pump blood in space. A muscle that does not work hard gets weaker and smaller. Astronauts' other muscles and their bones can get weaker too, because they do not have to work as hard to move the astronaut's body. Astronauts have to do exercises when they're in space so they don't get weak. They use big rubber bands. They attach them to the walls of the spaceship and hook them over their shoulders. Then they bend their knees and press against them to make their legs stronger. All right, so we have got some good notes here. Give me a green check if you have some good notes that you took. Excellent. And many of you probably have a 1 and a 2 next to several things. I know that Carly has a 1 and a 2 next to several of the notes that she took up here. And when students are taking notes, if they have a 1 and a 2, that means that both articles are making that fact valid. So really, when you see 1, 2, 3, 4 next to the different notes, you realize that all of the different sources are saying the same thing. So it just solidifies and validates that fact. So that's something to keep in mind. All right, so let's take a look here. We've got really good notes. We have why is it hard floating in space and what do astronauts do? So let's take a look here. Our question number 2, which source best tells how feeling as though you're floating in space affects the astronauts? Type your answer in the space below. And remember, we want to identify what source described the feeling of floating in space, and we want to be able to give 2 examples of that. So how would you answer that question? Share in the chat box. How would you answer that question that is posed here? So go ahead and write your little essay in the chat box. And I'm going to take the follow button off. So if you need to go back to the article, you don't have the article, so it doesn't really matter at this point. Go back to your notes and type up a little paragraph explaining which one explains floating in space better, and give 2 examples of why. Let's take about 2 minutes to do that. Make sure to put your essay in the chat area once you're finished. And realize your notes are probably going to look very different than Carly's notes, and that's okay. You can organize it any way that you want, whatever makes sense so you can get back to that information and write your article. You've got about a minute left. Push away any perfectionistic tendencies. We'll just get these articles out. Lower that level of concern. We're just practicing. The question was, why are we typing this? We're typing this because I'm going to give you a rubric, and I want you to have your article in front of you so that you can see how you did. So just type up a few sentences, 3 or 4 sentences, put it in the chat area, and then I will share with you the rubric. All right, how did you do? Go ahead and read this. These are some samples of what 3rd grade writing should be like. A 2-point response, a sample 2-point response, a sample 1-point response, and a sample 0-point response. So how did you do with your writing? Go ahead and read through these and then use your text tool to see where you would place yourself. Would you have given yourself 2 points, 1 point, or 0 points? All right, so here are the different 2-point responses, 1-point response, and 0-point responses. Some of you are sharing how you would have scored yourself. Go ahead and do that if you would like to, but this just gives you a picture of what that rubric and how that paper would be scored. I'm going to send you to a site in a little bit, as soon as we're finished today, that will actually give you a rubric for how this is scored. It's everything that it's scored on. So you can go in there and read this. But this just gives you an idea of how you did and what is expected on this test. If this is making sense so far, go ahead and give me a green check. So excellent. Perfect. Thank you. It looks like it's making sense for many of you. So we started with the stimulus, and that was the little discussion that we had with those 3 questions at the beginning, and now we're into the information processing stage. So go ahead and use your pointer tool. What did we experience today in the information processing stage? Go ahead and put your pointer tool on that. Excellent. Great. Yeah, so we experienced some research questions and some comprehension questions. Students may also get a simulated internet search, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So this is just showing that the information processing needs to be there and that they're going through the processing steps. Remember, these tests, these 2 or 3 questions are not scored on conventions. They don't need to spell things correctly. It doesn't have to be in proper form. They just need to get their ideas out. So that's how that portion works. All right, everybody take a deep breath and let it out. And let's go ahead and look at part 2. So this is our assignment, and we already have read through this assignment. This is where we are actually creating a magazine article. So students have moved from talking about it, writing some short answers about what they read, to actually writing an article. So basically, the next piece, we're not going to do this, but I'm going to explain how it's done, is you take that second piece of paper, and what you're going to do is you're going to fold it into fourths again, and then open it up. And then you'll look back at your notes. So let's go ahead and look back at the notes that Carly took. And this is, what do astronauts do? So basically what you want to teach your students to do is you want them to be able to take this information that they have here and create an article about what astronauts do in space. And I like to use the 4-square model for this because I want them to take the notes, and maybe they'll say in part number 1, this first section, it might be about the training that they need. Part number 2 might be about the environment or the working conditions. The third quadrant might be about some things that they might enjoy about the job. And the last one might be dangerous things that come with the job. So what you're going to do with your students is you're going to help them to understand how you would take the notes that you took here and how you would begin to categorize them. So it's really easy inside of Illuminate because we can hold on to these and drag them to different places. Basically, that's what they're doing, and they're rewriting those notes. Does that make sense? Give me a green check if that makes sense. You're categorizing them and teaching your students. Basically, you're creating an outline is what you're doing. So you're putting them in categories and you're creating an outline with your students that they will have a 4-part essay with the ideas that they got from their writing. Okay, excellent. Looks like we've got that. So that is the product or performance that's required here. So we were writing a magazine article using your pointer tool. Which one of these did we do today? Which one did we practice on that last step, the product and performance? That's right. We did an essay report story script. In this case, we did a magazine article. They may do a speech with or without graphics. Probably at the older ages, I would expect something like that. Maybe responses to embedded constructed response questions. So basically reading the information and having responses throughout. They're just showing what they know. And in this case, it was a magazine article. Okay, so as we look at this process, I'm really curious. What was interesting about the process? Is there anything that surprised you? And how could you use this process with other things that you're working on with your children in the curriculum or in terms of independent study? I'm going to turn the microphone over to you. If you have any ideas, please feel free to share them. And the next step, as soon as we're done sharing this, I want to share with you a tool that you can create at home that's not just a boring 4-squared piece of paper, but an actual tool that you can create at home to do this, I think, more effectively. So go ahead and take the microphone if you'd like to share and answer any one of these questions, or type it into the chat area.
Brandy, this is Carly, and I just would like to say that one thing that I loved about this process is you know, we already do this stuff with our students on the online school. All year, I know in the Idaho Virtual Academy, in our gifted classes, we've been working with our students on writing language arts papers. And you're going through these lessons with them, but this is a great way to help them organize their thoughts outside and away from you, away from being able to have your guidance with that. And it's not something that just won't help them with this upcoming test. The thing I love about it is that it's something that will help them always, whenever they're having to write a paper and glean information from something and have to then write about it. It's a great way to help them organize their ideas and their thoughts. And so I think that is one of the things I love about it. It's just something I'm going to be able to teach my daughter to help prepare her better for the upcoming test. So anyone else like to share?
So for some of you who are surprised that your students will be working with a partner, you know, that surprised me too. We're trying to figure out some ways virtually of what that's going to look like inside of our classroom and testing situations, but it really does put kids on a more even field if they get a chance to talk about it and get their brains going about it first. Ms. Harris asks, will they get a printout of the article? And sometimes it is easier to look at a printout. They will need to read the article on the screen. Different virtual academies may be different. I know in the Idaho Virtual Academy, they'll be reading it directly from the screen. So they won't be, they'll be able to jump back and forth, but they won't have a printed copy. The brick and mortar schools will be required to take the test too, so if your state is participating in this test, brick and mortar charter schools, everybody will be required to take the test. Somebody asked if Idaho has gifted classes online. We do have gifted classes that we offer to our families online in the areas of math and language arts, and then we do some enrichment classes in April for our students. Oh, great! You're saying that it's a lot easier than when you went to school. You know, once I learned this, especially when I learned how important it was to take the information that I'd taken notes from, to categorize it into those 4 areas to create like ideas and to make an outline from those ideas, my life was so much easier. I think that's one of the best skills that you can teach your students, and I will show you how to do that in just a second. And it says this could be used for literature lessons, writing to a prompt, comparing and contrasting, making inferences, all sorts of things. And yes, it can be used across the curriculum. Language arts, science, history, everything. All right. No, the question here is, do they write all their notes online? No, they write their notes on a piece of paper. They don't write them online. They answer the questions online, but the notes are on a piece of paper, and that paper will be provided to them when they get to the test. And Patrina says that she's interested that the students will actually do note-taking and research, which is very interesting. They do it at a younger level, but you know what? What our college professors are saying is students are coming into college and they're not college and career ready. And that's what these core standards are saying. We want our kids to be college and career ready. And in order to do that, they need to know how to write. Think about how many papers that you write in college. This process, if you start now when they're young and you teach them, they are going to be a whiz when they get to middle school and high school, and they're going to soar when they get to college. It's the number one thing that kids need to do in order to be successful in college is to know how to write and communicate effectively, to take notes, either if it's notes their teacher giving them notes in an auditory way, or if it's taking notes from a book, and then taking those notes and creating original thought. That's what we need to do in order to be successful for college. And the other thing is grit. So teaching kids really that perseverance and that grit, that stick-to-itiveness, those are the 2 things that I believe make kids successful in college. One question is, if they need help jumping back and forth? Yes, somebody will be there to help them. We can't give them answers to any of the tests when we get asked any kind of content questions, but if they need help with like where the arrows are, the back and forth arrow, we can definitely help with that to show them how to maneuver back and forth. And students will be given instruction before the test begins on how to do all of those things. We feel, Carly and I, that our kids are going to have a step up from other kids just because they've experienced the virtual world. They know what it's like to move around from step by step in the online school, to push the arrows back and forth. They know how to do all those things. So that's definitely an advantage that they will have. And they type their final work. Yes, they do. So Carly's going to type in, if she wouldn't mind, rapidtyping.com and typingweb.com. Those are 2 things that our students will be able to use to help them to get ready for the upcoming test. All right. Excellent. I know there are more comments in here. I'm going to save some of these if there's questions afterwards. I want to get to one last thing and stay within our time zone here. I know we went a little bit over. I was expecting it to go an hour to hour and 15 minutes, but I do want to show you this last tool that I wanted to share with you. And this is a tool that I think is fantastic. I used it in my own research. I use it with my kids. It is a great tool. And it's basically a file folder. So you can go anywhere and pick out a file folder. If you want to get colored ones, that's fine. You can use book pockets here, and then you'll see that I have 8 book pockets. That's the easiest thing to do. If you Google book pocket templates, there are templates out there that you can cut and make your own book pockets out of some heavy cardstock if you don't want to buy them. I know when you buy them, sometimes they come in like 100 pack at Staples or Office Max. So sometimes it's just easier to cut those out. You can also use envelopes. So if you want to cut an envelope in half and just glue the sides, you can use envelopes, or you can just put the envelope across the whole section over on this side. Just put an envelope and then put your note cards in. You're going to need 8 note cards. And what I like to do with this folder is I like to laminate it. I'll show you how to use it in just a second, but I like to laminate it because when you laminate it, you can turn it upside down and the note cards don't fall out. So for every project that your child does, they will use the same pocket folder, and the notes that we took in those squares just go right here on top of the note card. So we know that our thing is about astronauts, so I might put on the little tab up here astronauts, and then I might put up here hard. What's hard about the job? I might put floating over here, and I might put like a job description over here. If I was writing about that, my notes go right in here, just like I did on the piece of paper, but I actually have a physical spot to put them. A lot of times, I know for some of you, give me a green check if you learned how to take notes, 1 note per note card in your language arts class. I know for me, that's how we learned it. Everything had 1 note. I like this better because once they have all the information, they have the big ideas together. And once you get the big ideas together, then you can create an outline for that. It doesn't necessarily need to be on each individual note card. And so exactly like we did before with the 4 squares, we would write that information here. Now, let's say that we're doing a book report. These things suddenly change. We might have character on this card. We might have setting. We might have plot. We might have, and I did say character, we might have problem. So we can then begin to take different areas of the curriculum and we just change out these note cards. You may have several of these in different colors. Maybe your blue file is for science, your yellow files for language arts. However you want to do it, you just change out the note cards, or you can have several of these. What I like to do is I like to color code the note cards depending on the subject that I'm doing. When I'm finished with these note cards, I can just punch a hole in them and get one of those little book clips, or even just a big binder clip and clip them together so the student will have those. But really what you do is you take these note cards and then you put them in order from, maybe you want to talk about the character first, and then the setting, and then the plot, and then the problem, and then the climax. You can put those in order, and then your students will write an outline based on the notes that they used. Remember, when we talked about brevity earlier and using as few words as possible, this is really going to help with plagiarism. Because now your students don't copy word for word out of the book. They actually look at what it is that they're doing, and they are trying to be just as brief as possible. And then when they state it, it's definitely going to be in their own words, and you won't have to worry about that plagiarism. Again, when you're using something like, for instance, I'm using this with my son right now, and we are using it for a current events project, and he needs to read a couple articles or watch a news clip and read an article or a newspaper article, something like that, on a current event. So what we would do is we would look at the current event, we'd pull out the big ideas, whatever we want that to be in there. It might be, for us, it's going to be who, what, when, where, and why, because we need to summarize the event. Pull it from 2 different sources, put 1 and 2 next to it, usually what I do on these is I take a blank piece of paper, and on the front I write number 1, and I write the bibliography out. I actually put the source in bibliography form, and I put number 1 and number 2 so we know where it's from, and then they just put 1 and 2 next to their facts, and he's good to go. So hopefully you find this valuable. I wanted to make sure that you had the paper version first, because that's something that your students are going to be able to use when they come into the test. But in the chat area right now, what are some ways that you can use this in the curriculum? There are many different ways, and I'm sure many of you are thinking through, wow, this is a wonderful process. How can I use this in the curriculum? And think about it. So passion projects might be one way. We talked about book reports, maybe a science report that you're doing. There are so many different ways, and I'm sure that your brains are just going right now, and you're thinking of different ways that your students can use this. And basically, it's just an educational tool that you can use to help your students organize their thinking. I would definitely love to hear what you learned if you want to type that into the chat area. I am going to push you out to the website so you have this information. Before I do, though, I do want to point out up at the top, if you would like to come back and print the whiteboards, so if you want to have this information in whiteboard form so you can go back and look at it again, you just go up to the upper left-hand corner and you put in File, press Print, Whiteboard, select all pages, and OK. And then once you do that, you will have all of the whiteboards, so you can go back, take a look at what we did. This will be recorded, and I will send the recording out. I'll also post it on our website, and our website is giftedresources.com. Carly and I do trainings. We've done them for the past couple years, and we put our trainings up to giftedresources.com. Once you open up one of the trainings, our YouTube link is there, and there's like 25 different trainings that you can go to. So please, it's on giftedresources.com, and I've got the link here at the bottom if you're interested in going there. We have a newsletter that comes out every couple weeks, so you're welcome to join us there. We have a Facebook page and a Pinterest page and a Twitter page, and we have a blog that comes out, and we definitely want you to be part of that conversation that we're having. I'm going to put in the link to the testing site, and I'm going to take you there very quickly, and I want to show you what it is that you're going to be looking at once you get here. So here is the testing site, and give me a smiley face if you can see it. I'm trusting that all of you can. Excellent. So this is the resources and documentation that you need, and you can scroll down. It's got some practice test information in here that you need, and then the classroom activities that they're going to be doing. We did the astronauts one, and that's grade 3. This gives you the grade and content area over here on the right-hand side, and then if you open up, you can see the different activities that students will be doing. So all the resources are right here, and you can go through for the different grade levels and see how it goes. There's a math activity and there's a language arts. We went over language arts. You're definitely going to want to go in and take a look at math. I pulled my resources from here. It's grade 3, and it gives you the test and the performance task. It gives you all the different grade levels, and it gives you sample math tests and sample language arts tests. So you have those too. And then it talks here about some performance-based writing rubrics, and those are all right here. And this is not password protected. This is open to anybody, anytime. And I'm going to go ahead and put the link inside of the chat area so you have it, just in case you weren't able to see it. So I do want to know what you learned today. Please type in a sentence 2 or 3 what you learned in the chat area, and we are going to be around for questions afterwards. So if you have any questions at all, please take the microphone and share those questions with us. Thank you so much for joining us today and investing your heart and soul in your kids' education. It really makes a difference, and it's going to make a difference in the future and the legacy that you leave behind for your own children. So please let us know what you learned today. We'll be here afterwards for questions, and do check us out at giftedresources.com. Again, this is Brandy Maynard. I'm so thankful, and I'm speaking for both Carly and I, so thankful that you were able to make it today. Thanks so much for your time, and we look forward to seeing you again. In our next session, we won't be meeting in March, but we will be meeting again in April. So we'll be sending that out. Thanks, everybody, and have a great rest of the week. All right, I see some questions coming through. One of them was the evaluation of the state test. That's going to be done by an evaluation team, so it's not anybody who's in the school unless they've been selected to be on that evaluation team. These performance-based tests are hand-graded, so they'll have a group of people that are either volunteer or paid, I'm not sure, that will be hand scoring these. We will not get these scores back. Parents won't get these scores back. There's no way to access these scores. So this will just be a practice for your kids so they can experience what it's like, and they'll have an opportunity to take it again next year where all of the information will come back. You are all free to go. If you have any questions at all, we'll stay on for just a little while and answer those questions for you. You're asking about the gifted program in Virginia. I know that K-12 is trying to get gifted programs in many of the different schools, and some of them are happening sooner than others. So just keep your ears peeled, and I'm sure that there will be some news coming out for you on when your school will be having an ALP program. If Gary, I don't know if you're still on. It doesn't look like he is, so he's not able to speak to that. But I am sure that you will have some type of resources in the future. If you have a new question, go ahead and just type it in the chat area, and then we will go ahead and answer that as they come in. Every state is different, and this is preparation. This test is for students in 3rd through 10th grade, and so if you have a student in 3rd through 10th grade and your state is participating in the testing, then you will have testing this year. I'm going to go back to the map so you have it, and the map will have a picture of all the states that are participating this year. And it looks like you're from Nevada, so your state is participating this year, so it just depends whether or not your student is in 3rd grade or above.